In March of 1891, the United States Geological Survey officially withdrew Topographical Chart 47B from circulation. The withdrawal notice, preserved in the National Archives, contains a single handwritten annotation in the margin, fatally deficient regarding seasonal water sources, Alvord Desert region. By then, 4 people were already dead. The Garrett Survey Party departed from Winnemucca, Nevada, on the morning of September 14, 1890. Their objective was straightforward: establish a direct wagon route between the mining operations near McDermitt and the railroad terminus at Winnemucca, cutting through the Alvord Desert in what was then southeastern Oregon Territory. The route would save freight haulers nearly 60 miles compared to the established Northern Passage. Martin Garrett led the party. He was 31 years old, a contract surveyor for the Great Basin Mining Consortium, educated at the Columbia School of Mines. His fieldwork across Nevada and Utah had earned him a reputation for efficiency and precision. Company records describe him as thorough to the point of rigidity. His assistant was James Holcomb, age 23, recently arrived from Pennsylvania. Holcomb had worked 2 seasons on railroad surveys through the Alleghenies. He kept detailed field notes, most of which survived. The teamster was a man named Chen Wei, approximately 40 years old, originally from Guangdong Province. He had worked freight routes throughout the basin since 1883. Census records list him only as John Chen, teamster. He spoke limited English. Company logs note he had refused this particular job twice before accepting. The 4th member was Samuel Pryor, age 57, a geologist under contract to assess mineral deposits along the proposed route. Pryor had published 3 papers on basin and range geology. His personal correspondence suggests he considered the assignment beneath his expertise. They traveled with 2 wagons, 6 mules, and provisions calculated for 18 days. Garrett carried United States Geological Survey Chart 47B, dated April 1889, covering the region from Winnemucca north to the Steens Mountain Range. The chart was among the first systematic surveys of that territory. Garrett's preparatory notes, recovered later, indicate complete reliance on the chart. He calculated mileage, identified camping sites, and plotted water sources directly from its annotations. His notes contain the phrase "per USGS chart" 37 times across 6 pages. The chart showed 3 water sources along their intended route through the Alvord Desert: a spring marked at mile 41, a seasonal creek at mile 68, and a marked well at mile 83. All 3 were incorrectly plotted. The chart's field survey had been conducted in April of 1889, following an unusually wet winter. The cartographer had marked water sources as permanent features without seasonal qualification. This was a common practice in early Western surveys and not technically a violation of USGS protocols at the time. The assumption was that users would apply local knowledge. Garrett had no local knowledge. He had never worked north of the Humboldt Sink. None of the party had crossed the Alvord Desert before. On the morning of their departure, a freight hauler named Micah Thorne encountered the party at the northern edge of Winnemucca. Thorne had driven cattle across the Alvord crossing in July. According to a deposition he gave 7 weeks later, he told Garrett directly, "That country's dry as bone by September. You'll want the long route or wait for snow." Garrett's response is recorded in Thorne's statement, "I have the government chart. We'll be fine." They left Winnemucca heading northwest at approximately 8 in the morning. Weather conditions were clear. Temperature at departure was recorded at 61 degrees. The first 3 days proceeded without incident. Holcomb's field journal describes ordinary survey work. They covered an average of 14 miles per day, stopping frequently for Garrett to take compass bearings and establish sight lines. Pryor examined rock formations and collected samples. Chen Wei managed the animals and handled camp duties each evening. On September 16th, Holcomb noted they had passed beyond reliable maps and were now working exclusively from Chart 47B. He sketched the landscape in his journal: flat alkaline plains broken by isolated fault block ridges, sagebrush and scattered juniper. He described the terrain as monotonous but navigable. They camped that night near a dry wash. Garrett marked it in his records as corresponding to a drainage feature on the chart. According to Holcomb's entry, they had consumed approximately 1/3 of their water supply, precisely as planned. The chart indicated the first marked spring was now less than 20 miles ahead. On the morning of September 17th, Chen Wei reportedly approached Garrett and spoke to him at length. Holcomb observed the exchange but did not record the content. In testimony given later by a Chinese labor contractor in Winnemucca who had known Chen Wei, it was suggested that Chen had wanted to turn back. The contractor stated that Chen Wei knew desert and would have recognized warning signs. But this is second-hand interpretation given months after the fact. What is documented is that the party continued northwest. By midday on September 18th, they reached the location marked on Chart 47B as Spring Reliable. Garrett's notes include the coordinates. Holcomb's journal describes what they found: a shallow depression with white alkali crust and desiccated vegetation. No water. No evidence water had been present in recent months. Garrett spent 90 minutes verifying his position. He took multiple compass readings and cross-referenced landmarks visible to the south. His notes confirm he was at the correct location as charted. Holcomb wrote, "Garrett insists the survey cannot be wrong. He believes we are misreading the landscape." They did not alter course. Garrett's records from that evening recalculate distances to the next marked water source, the seasonal creek, now approximately 43 miles ahead. At their current pace, 2.5 days. Pryor's personal journal, recovered later, contains an entry from that night. He wrote, "Garrett is a fool, but he is a credentialed fool. I defer to his navigation, as that is not my domain. The water will be where the chart says, or it will not. I am too old to argue." No entry from Chen Wei exists. He left no written records. On the morning of September 19th, they rationed water for the first time. Each person received 1 pint at dawn. The mules were given reduced portions. Holcomb noted the animals were showing stress. The temperature that day reached 94 degrees. Humidity was negligible. Garrett maintained their northwest heading. His notes from that day are brief but confident. He wrote, "Chart indicates creek within 2 days. Party morale adequate. Progress steady." Holcomb's journal is less certain. He described the landscape as increasingly desolate. He mentioned heat shimmer distorting the ridgelines. He noted that Pryor had stopped collecting samples and now rode silently in the wagon. There is one additional detail in Holcomb's entry from September 19th, easily overlooked. He wrote, "Chen turned twice to look back south, said nothing. That evening they camped in open desert. No landmarks, no shade. Garrett's calculations showed they had covered 16 miles. The chart indicated 27 miles remaining to the creek. By this point, they had been 6 days without resupply. Water reserves were at 40% of departure levels." September 20th, 1890. Holcomb's journal entry for that morning is the most detailed record we have of the next 36 hours. He wrote in pencil, and portions of the text are smudged, possibly by perspiration or later handling. The handwriting remains legible. They broke camp at first light. Temperature at dawn was 68 degrees. The sky was cloudless. Holcomb describes the air as thin and bitter. By mid-morning, one of the mules had begun to falter. Chen Wei halted the team twice to adjust the harness and redistribute weight. Garrett did not stop. According to Holcomb, Garrett walked ahead of the wagons, carrying the chart case and compass, eyes fixed on the northwestern horizon. At approximately 11 o'clock, they reached elevated ground, a low basalt ridge that allowed a view of the terrain ahead. Garrett climbed to the highest point and scanned north with field glasses. Holcomb joined him. In his journal he wrote, "From the ridge we could see 15, perhaps 20 miles ahead. Flat country. No green. No shadow that might indicate water." Garrett's response is recorded in Holcomb's notes. The chart places the creek 11 miles northwest of this position. Creeks follow drainages. Drainages are not always visible at distance. They descended the ridge and continued. By early afternoon, the heat was extreme. Holcomb estimated the temperature exceeded 100 degrees. He describes the landscape shimmering, the mountains to the west appearing to float above the ground. At 2 o'clock, Chen Wei stopped the wagons without instruction. He climbed down and walked directly to Garrett. The exchange that followed is recorded in fragmented form across both Holcomb's journal and later testimony. Chen Wei spoke in limited English, supplemented by gestures. He pointed south, back toward the direction of Winnemucca. He made a drinking motion. He pointed at the mules. Garrett's reply, as transcribed by Holcomb: "We are closer to the creek than to Winnemucca. Turning back is illogical." Chen Wei responded with something Holcomb could not fully understand, but the word map was repeated. Then the word wrong. Garrett's answer is preserved exactly. The United States Geological Survey does not publish incorrect charts. There was silence. Holcomb wrote that Pryor sat in the wagon, watching, and said nothing. Chen Wei returned to the team. They continued northwest. Holcomb's journal contains a passage written that evening after they had made camp. The entry is longer than usual and the tone is different, more reflective, as though he understood he was recording something that mattered. He wrote, "We have now traveled 68 miles from Winnemucca. The chart shows the creek at this location. We are at this location. There is no creek. There is no drainage. There is only flat ground and white dust." Garrett walked the area for an hour. He took his measurements again. He referenced the chart, compared elevations, checked his compass, and returned to camp. He said the survey could not be in error to this degree. He suggested the creek might be subterranean at this time of year, flowing beneath the surface. He proposed we dig. Pryor asked how deep. Garrett said 10 feet, perhaps 15. Chen did not speak. He prepared the evening meal. We received 1/2 pint of water each. The mules received less. One animal is lame. Another refuses grain. We have water remaining for 2 days, perhaps 3 if we reduce rations further. Garrett insists we are on course. He states we will reach the marked well in 3 days' travel. He has calculated it exactly. 83 miles from Winnemucca. We are at mile 68. The arithmetic is clear. I do not believe there is a well. That night, the temperature dropped to 53 degrees. Holcomb mentions that Chen Wei sat apart from the others, facing south. September 21st. They did not dig for water. Garrett had reconsidered overnight. His notes from that morning state: subterranean flow unlikely in alkali substrate. Digging would expend energy reserves without probable return. Instead, he made a different decision. At dawn, Garrett gathered the party and presented his assessment. Holcomb's record of the speech is probably paraphrased, but the content is consistent with Garrett's written orders from that day, which survived. Garrett stated, "They were 15 miles from the well marked on chart 47B. At current pace, they would reach it by evening of September 22nd. Water reserves were sufficient to reach that point, provided they reduced rations immediately and abandoned non-essential equipment." He ordered the following: 1 wagon to be abandoned, all geological samples to be left behind, all surveying equipment except compass and chart to be discarded, personal items limited to 5 pounds per man. The mules would pull a single wagon. They would travel through the afternoon heat if necessary. The objective was the well. Once there, they would resupply and then proceed either forward to McDermitt or return south with full water barrels. Pryor objected. His statement, recorded by Holcomb: "You are guessing. The chart has been wrong twice. It will be wrong a 3rd time." Garrett's reply: "The spring was miscategorized. The creek is seasonal and has gone dry. A well is a permanent structure. It will be there." Pryor said nothing further. Chen Wei was not asked for his opinion. They consolidated supplies into a single wagon. The process took 3 hours. They left behind Pryor's sample cases, most of the surveying chain and stakes, 1 tent, and several crates of preserved goods. Holcomb notes they kept only water, hardtack, dried meat, and flour. They departed at noon, temperature 97 degrees, heading northwest. For the remainder of September 21st and into the 22nd, Holcomb's entries become sparse. He notes mileage, temperature, and the condition of the mules. 2 animals were visibly weakening. The men were rationed 4 ounces of water twice daily. On the afternoon of September 22nd, they reached the coordinates Garrett had calculated for the well. Holcomb's entry: "There is no well, there is no structure. There is no indication a well ever existed at this location." Garrett checked his chart. He checked again. He walked a quarter-mile in each direction. He found nothing. He has not spoken since. That evening, they made camp in open desert. Water reserves, less than 2 gallons total. Distance to Winnemucca, 83 miles southeast. Distance to McDermitt, approximately 47 miles northwest. Garrett's journal contains no entries after September 22nd. On the morning of September 23rd, Chen Wei took 1 canteen, a blanket, and left the camp on foot, heading southeast. Holcomb does not describe the departure in detail. He writes only, "Chen has gone. He left before dawn. He is walking back toward Winnemucca." There is no record of anyone trying to stop him. Garrett, Holcomb, and Pryor remained with the wagon and the mules. Garrett's plan, as summarized by Holcomb, was to continue northwest toward McDermitt. The distance was shorter. There were mining camps in the region. They would encounter water or people, or both. They traveled 11 miles on September 23rd. On September 24th, they covered 6 miles. 1 mule collapsed and could not rise. They left it behind. Holcomb's final journal entry is dated September 25th, 1890. The handwriting is unsteady but controlled. He wrote, "We have no water. Pryor can no longer walk. Garrett will not leave the chart. He holds it even now, as though it might change if he reads it again. I do not believe we will reach McDermitt." The entry ends there. On October 11th, 1890, a freight hauler named Samuel Osterman, traveling from the mining camp at Denio to Winnemucca, encountered a man walking south through the Alvord Desert. The man was Chinese, critically dehydrated and unable to speak. Osterman gave him water and transported him to Winnemucca. The man was Chen Wei. He had walked nearly 70 miles in 18 days. He survived. Chen Wei provided testimony to the Humboldt County Sheriff on October 14th through a translator. He described the route, the dry springs, the decision to continue northwest, and his own choice to turn back. He provided approximate locations. His description of landmarks was vague. He had been delirious for much of the return journey. A search party departed Winnemucca on October 16th. They found the abandoned wagon on October 19th at a location 89 miles northwest of Winnemucca, consistent with Chen Wei's testimony. Inside the wagon, they found the bodies of Martin Garrett and Samuel Pryor. Garrett was holding chart 47B. Pryor was lying in the wagon bed. Cause of death in both cases, dehydration and exposure. James Holcomb's body was found 400 yards from the wagon, lying face down. His field journal was in his coat pocket. The search party buried all 3 men on site. Markers were placed. The graves were later relocated to the Winnemucca Cemetery in 1903 during a regional survey. Chen Wei's final statement to authorities, recorded October 14, 1890, contains one additional detail. He stated that before he left the camp on September 23rd, he had tried to take the chart from Garrett. He wanted to tear it apart. Garrett had refused. Garrett told him the chart was government property and could not be destroyed. Chen Wei was asked why he thought the chart was wrong. His reply, as translated, "No water where map says. Map from spring, when rain. We come in fall, no rain. Map, not know this." The USGS reviewed Chart 47B in November 1890. The review concluded that the chart's water source annotations were accurate to conditions observed during survey fieldwork April 1889, but failed to account for seasonal variation in arid climates. The chart was withdrawn from circulation in March 1891. No formal apology was issued. Government surveys of that era were not required to provide seasonal qualifications. Garrett, Holcomb, and Pryor were not the last to die following early USGS charts, but their case prompted the first internal memorandum recommending annotation standards for desert water sources. The memorandum was filed and forgotten. In 1927, a historian named Alice Kern traveled to Winnemucca while researching early survey expeditions for the Western States Historical Quarterly. She interviewed descendants of families who had known the men involved. She reviewed county records, surveyor logs, and field journals archived at the Nevada State Library. She also located Chen Wei. He was 77 years old, living in a boarding house in Reno. His health was poor. He agreed to speak with her once, briefly. Kern's notes from that interview are preserved at the University of Nevada. They are handwritten, 2 pages. Chen Wei told her he had not thought about the desert in many years. He said he remembered the heat and the silence, and the way Garrett had carried the map as though it were sacred. Kern asked if he believed Garrett had made a mistake. Chen Wei's response, as Kern recorded it: he believed map more than his eyes. Map say water, so he look for water. No water, so he look again. He think map true and ground wrong. Ground always right. Ground don't lie. Kern asked if he thought the deaths could have been prevented. Chen Wei paused for a long time. Then he said, "We could go back." I say go back, he say no. He show me the map. Kern asked one final question. Did Chen Wei blame Garrett? His answer: he trust map. Map made by important men. He think important men don't make mistake. But important men not walk in desert in September. They walk in April when water everywhere. They make map in April. Map true for April. We come September. Map lie for September. Chen Wei died in November 1928. He was buried in the Reno Municipal Cemetery. His grave is unmarked. Alice Kern published her findings in 1929 in an article titled "Surveyor Confidence and the Alvord Incident, a Study in Cartographic Misjudgment." The article was read by fewer than 200 people. It has been cited 3 times in academic literature. Chart 47B itself no longer exists. The USGS discarded withdrawn charts as standard practice until 1913. No copy has been located in any archive. What remains are the journals, the testimonies, and 3 graves in Winnemucca. Garrett's headstone, erected by his family in 1903, contains no mention of the desert. It lists his name, his birth year, and his profession: surveyor, faithful in his duties. There is a truth in that. Martin Garrett was faithful to his chart. He followed it exactly, adjusted for every minor deviation, double-checked his calculations, and trusted the institutions that had produced it. He believed in the accuracy of systems, the authority of expertise, and the reliability of official documents. The map was not malicious. It was not fraudulent. It was simply precise about the wrong season. And Garrett could not imagine that precision and correctness were not the same thing. In April of 1889, when the USGS cartographer surveyed the Alvord Desert, water was present at every location he marked. His chart was accurate to what he saw. But he saw the desert in spring, when snowmelt fed every wash and alkali flat, and he marked permanence where there was only timing. Garrett saw the map in September, when the desert was as it actually lived most of the year, empty, dry, and indifferent. He believed the map. The ground was right. He died proving the map wrong.